like meet all brothers.
No, we don't want both.
And then, if you're in a leadership role, like.
Or tips for the advisors to working with collegians. From your perspective.
I think like understanding, like they need to be understanding of what the undergraduate chapter wants, and to be a voice for them when it's a reasonable request.
I think that's all I have to do.
Last one, let's have you have 3.
Overall philosophies. I'd say like in a leadership role, like make it about the guys, not about outside perspective.
Should I go ahead and do like the time when they all come in and they can like check in as attendees? I think that's
I say not until like 4 more minutes.
okay.
Focus on your membership.
That's all I have to do. Stop practice mode.
Are we gonna like expand on these or just
These are the ones. These are.
Okay.
You can. That's why if we shorten up some of the, are they the same?
No.
If they shorten up
We're in practice mode.
If we shorten up some of the earlier things and we just do bullet points, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, then the things that we want to expand on will be our support.
Yeah.
Citizen advisors, so we can shorten the stuff we say about the chapter operations and increase what we say in terms of our support, our philosophies, and the obstacles. Does that sound fair? J-Rob.
I think I'm gonna sit over there the entire time just in case something.
Oh, yeah. What should I put for J-Rob? What would be J-Rob's philosophies? What are his, I asked him, but he was gonna text me, but he knows everything.
I don't know, I don't wanna speak for him.
Here's what we're gonna do.
You just put it, like his picture on my slide.
We are same age, my friend. And then he can add.
You put like, undergraduate philosophies maybe or something, I don't know. If you don't wanna do that, it's cool.
Yeah. Oh, could I have Russell and then y'all? Maybe just, Russell, you say your philosophies, you say as an advisor, and then when you say yours as undergraduate, no, I'll delete that guy. Those are my final ones. That's kind of exactly what yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll finish it up if they have questions, and then as questions pop in, we'll literally be like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like whoever wants to take it.
Cool.
Or whoever we feel is best. And then I put everybody's information.
Yeah.
So questions will be a roundabout, and then once questions are done, then Russell, if you want to talk about contact information.
Yep.
And then I'll thank them for coming, and we can all thank, whatever.
Am I opening it up for questions?
I am.
Oh, you are.
When I finish.
Okay.
And then anybody can just jump, and we can close questions whenever you feel.
Okay.
How do we feel?
I feel good.
You feel all right?
Yeah, how many people do you think are gonna tune in?
Between 6 and 30.
Yeah. I feel like this could be, like, I mean, it's good because they're, like, recording it to, like, be posted, but, like, I feel like webinars always have, like, lower attendance than what you expect, which kind of sucks. But this is cool that they asked us to do this.
Yep.
Do you think there's anything missing? Do you think anything is unnecessary? Do you think that it's helpful?
I think it's helpful. I mean, it really does dive into what we do, and it's funny because like all this stuff I'm like, well, yeah, you do that, you do that, like,
yeah.
But that's because like like we've been around it for that many
Yeah,
years.
it seems like common sense does, but
Yeah.
That's why
not
you're
everyone's
the,
off.
that's why
Right.
you're the litmus paper of,
Yeah.
no, not every chapter does this. Like,
Yeah.
every sorority does all of these, well, actually, no, never mind.
But better, like it's more consistent across the board, I guess,
Yeah.
for sorority, because I feel like they have better support than fraternities, and like the fact that it's more structured.
And that was even a lot, y'all are better than a lot of sororities.
Well, thanks.
Okay. Last thing was, we'll check on time. If J-Rob comes during chapter operation stuff, okay, like, cause you were talking for a big chunk of time.
Yeah.
If he-
Just any other chapter operation.
Yeah, so if he comes, cause Russell and I don't really talk, we open it up and then we jump in after.
Yeah.
Which I purposely.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So we have 7 attendees.
How many?
7. Mm-hmm. And so then I need to do this. All right, hello everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with the advisor webinar. Today we're doing striving to achieve and maintain chapter success. And so we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. Okay. Yeah, just to make sure everyone can hear and that we got the volume and audio working, can you just type a message to us to confirm that you can hear everything okay?
And it'll be under your drop down in the chat box. So if you click the arrow to the left of the chat box, you can see there's a message entry box where you can type. So if you can just say like, yep, we can hear you, just at least one person, that'd be great. Can you guys hear us?
Michelle texted me and said she can hear us.
Okay, great. All right, sounds like everybody can hear us, so we'll get started with the presentation.
So, all right, so we'll start with introductions here. Hi everyone, my name is Russell Harp. I'm an alum of the Kansas State chapter, graduated in 2016. I'm currently a grad student at K-State right now, pursuing my master's in counseling and student development. I'm currently the leadership advisor for the chapter, and I'm a former expansion consultant, so worked for headquarters in 2016, helped start the Texas chapter, and then helped with leadership development of several chapters as well.
Hi everybody, my name is Kat Lopez. I am the current chapter advisor with Russell for the Kansas State chapter. Been in this role since 2012. I'm a journalism mass communications major from New Mexico State University, as well as received my master's in that field from here at Kansas State University. And I too was a former national consultant, but not for Delta Upsilon, it was for Zeta Tau Alpha, my undergraduate Greek organization.
Hello guys, I'm Nate Fleming. I'm currently in my 5th year here at K-State, and I've had the opportunity to serve the chapter as VP of Alumni Relations in 2015, and then later as chapter president in 2016. I'm currently working on a bachelor's in mechanical engineering here at K-State, and I'll be graduating this December.
And then we also have Josh Robinson, who was our previous president. He is actually in class right now and will be coming a little later on. So towards the end of the presentation, he'll chime in, but he served as the new member educator, VP of recruitment, chapter president, and is majoring in accounting. So we'll go ahead and get started with the overview of the webinar.
So during the course of this webinar, we appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us. We're going to be hitting some main categories in terms of Kansas State. We're going to get into the specifics of the general chapter components in terms of achieving success. We'll hear from our undergraduate leaders, Nate and potentially Josh here, to discuss the ins and outs of the operations of the K-State chapter. Some of these things might be things that you do within your chapter or not, but we'll kind of cover all gamuts of a chapter operations. We'll discuss support from a leadership, support for our leadership from an advisor and an alumni standpoint, discuss some obstacles and some potential solutions for them, and discuss once that success is reached, how chapters can maintain them and how advisors can support that sustainability. And we'll close it off with some overall philosophies, hopefully some best practices for you all to take away from our presentation, and obviously answer any questions. We'll be working through some examples of what has worked for K-State and that could potentially be implemented by all of you in your chapters. We'll, like I said, touch base on the best practices, but please take note of anything that you'd like us to elaborate on later. We'll kind of go through bullet points and just top level ideas and things that have worked for us. But if you'd like us to elaborate on it later, then we definitely will at the end of the webinar. We'll unmute everybody, and we will also open up questions, obviously, in the message box that you all should have in your GoToWebinar platform. We do understand that chapter size, campus culture, chapter resources, fraternity and sorority life resources, all of these affect certain areas of what we're about to talk about. But we just want to share with you what things look like for us. And we can get into specifics and try to support you all in your chapters later on. A lot of the stuff that we're saying this afternoon might be suggested already from IHQ. Or resources that they have on their website, or maybe even in the ritual book, but these are points of emphasis that we all as undergraduates and advisors and alumni felt were important to share with you. We just want to make sure you have a strong understanding as to how things operate over here in Little Manhattan, Kansas, and here at Kansas State. So we really appreciate your time, and hope that you find some helpful things for your chapter. So we'll go ahead and head into achieving success and what the ins and outs of the chapter look like.
Okay, guys, this is Nate, and I'm going to go over some of the chapter operations that we actually partake in here at K-State. So first, we're going to look at recruitment. So the VP of recruitment role is a little unique to our chapter. It's actually a compensated role because that role is so important to bringing in individuals who will carry on the legacy of DU. And so we work with 2 recruitment chairs. This helps us to ensure that both guys can manage the large time commitment and the responsibility of recruiting a pledge class of new members to come to the house. It's actually open recruitment at K-State. So what that looks like is it's more informal. We'll take guys out to lunch. We'll bring guys up to the house, give them tours of the house. And then as you can see to the right, we host a lot of rush events. So the one on the right is actually called the Slab Tournament. And so it's we rank players A, B, C, and then we have teams of 3-on-3 play a basketball tournament, and all the new members or the potential new members are invited up and actually have a tournament between us and them. So it's a super fun day, good opportunity to see the culture of the house, and just a really casual event. So we actually operate pretty much solely based on referrals. So we use something called Chapter Builder, which is a resource given to us by K-State Interfraternal Council, and it helps us keep track of all the individuals that we are potentially recruiting to become new members of DU at K-State. And so referrals can come from anybody from legacies to little brothers, friends from high school, like girlfriends, brothers, whatever it may be, but that's probably our strongest network of members coming into the house. And lastly, hit on recruiting criteria. We like to think that we hold a high standard for guys who we're trying to bring into the house. We really want to ensure that those guys meet the chapter culture. Pretty low key, laid back, just be yourself. I mean, that's one of the biggest things why I joined, was like I really felt like I could be myself, and that's something we strive to continue. We also try to make sure we meet basic criteria of a GPA requirement, because we think that's a good predictor of future success, especially in college. We also like to make sure that they're men of character, that they've been involved in things that show that they dedicate their time to something they care about, that they seem to be good individuals on all levels, and that their values align with our chapter values. Okay, so something that really helps us to structure all programming and development of members and other chapter operations are executive board meetings. So these are actually held on a weekly basis, and the president comes into the meeting with an agenda set so that they're efficient and effective. A lot of times you can come into these meetings and really not get a lot done. And when you meet for typically about an hour and a half for a meeting like this, you really need to make sure you know what you're talking about to maintain guys' attention and have the best conversation possible. So usually we host these meetings 3 days prior to chapter, and this allows the executive board to really have a good conversation about any upcoming events or ideas or issues that may be and the chapter at the time, and then also prepare that information to present it to the entire chapter at the at chapter meetings on Wednesdays. And then lastly, something I think is small but really important, it's the seating arrangement. And so what we've seen that works well is sitting in some sort of format where guys are facing one another, because that really keeps attention on the conversation at hand. And so whether that's in a circle, square, like whatever it may be, just make sure everybody is facing each other and everybody's on the same level. No position is more important than any other. Okay, moving into our chapter meetings. These are also held every week, and we follow parliamentary procedure. This is something that can be a little bit hard to do all the time, so just use it in times where you really need to be efficient and need to make sure you're following policy at hand, whether that's like an election or a membership review, etc. We always start each chapter meeting with Hail Delta Upsilon. This helps kind of bring everybody together and really kind of kick off with like a keynote to make sure everybody understands like, hey, we're starting chapter now. Everybody should be paying attention. So each of our officers actually stands up for the report. This is a small thing as well, but it's something that we really found to work. If you sit down, people are not like inherently not going to recognize that you're presenting something. And so having an officer stand up is really important to ensuring information is spread across the entire chapter. Attire is something we like to have fun with here. If we have a more formal chapter, obviously we have formal or business casual attire. That could be for a speaker or elections or an alumni coming back, etc. But a lot of times we like to mix it up a little bit. We have dress like your brother, sports themes, like we love wearing jerseys. And so really you don't have to take yourself too seriously. Like it's good to let your members mix it up a little bit. And we also like to recognize members. We think it's really important that whether you have a position or not, you're recognized within the house. And so some of these examples include like stud duck or brother of the week or study duck if you're doing well academically. And members are recognized by their brothers, which is really cool because it shows that people are understanding that like brothers are doing cool things across campus and for one another. And then lastly, just to make sure continuity is held and people who can't attend the meeting are informed, we have chapter minutes. And so our secretary takes minutes and he sends them out to the listserv as well as to the advisors to ensure that everybody's on the same page. All right, moving into new member programming. This is one of the most important parts, I think, of the new member education process. So we call it Welcome Week. We have a move-in scheduled, and the move-in is typically like 3 days later than the active members to ensure that the active members' rooms are set up and the house is clean to really have a good presentation for the new members as they move in and their families, because as you know, a fraternity house can get a little messy when move-in happens. And so on that first day, we have parent and new member orientation. So you can see in that top right picture, that's our new member orientation. So packets are handed out that review the code of conduct, contract information, general information about the chapter, and then dues associated with food and housing. And so it's actually presented from one of our alumni advisors who is an attorney in the city of Manhattan. And so he is really good about ensuring that parents are clear with all the dues and all the policies that they have to follow with their son living in the house. And we also have the officers present so they can get an idea, the new guys can get an idea of what the leadership in the house looks like at the time. And then after that, we follow up with a campus tour. Obviously, it can be a little intimidating going to your classes on your first day and having no idea where any of them are. And so we try to give them some reference as to where campus is, where some of the lecture halls are, and it's just a really cool opportunity to see campus for the first or second time. And then lastly, we like to have brotherhood events. So like during this week, we have something called the DU Olympics. So we'll have like a hot dog eating contest. We'll have sports played at one of the local parks. And it's just a good time during the summer just to relax, hang out, play some volleyball, football, whatever it may be. Okay, and then chapter programming. So this is really important to us at K-State. And we like to make sure we enrich all of our members' experiences and try to develop them as men throughout their time in DU. So it really starts with the new members when they first come into the house. Obviously, we have that campus tour. We try to set them up with guys who might be in their majors to help them kind of get an idea of what their classes are going to be like on the first day. And we also set them up with a What Women Want. It's kind of like a little panel of guys, girlfriends or sisters who come into the house and give them an idea of what it's like to interact with women in college versus high school. And then we also have etiquette dinner, guest speakers, just a lot of events to make sure that guys are informed and educated on current events and how to properly act. We have a well-rounded calendar, so all our events are held on one single calendar that's shared with all the members, and it has every event from philanthropy to brotherhood event to social things, whatever it may be, it's all on there. And then I'm going to hand this one over to Russell for just a second, but we prioritize philanthropy a lot, and one of the best ways to do that is through Miss K-State here.
And so an event we started was the Miss K-State competition about 6 years ago, and it's been awesome to see its growth. But what's really unique is that it involves almost every organization on campus. It takes all of our members' involvement to have a successful event. So these guys are the escorts or the coaches for the women competing. We have a full committee, and then it also takes the entire buy-in from the executive board. So I think there was definitely a shift in the chapter just for things that were prioritized, and it was really cool to see after the first year just the commitment to the community, the Manhattan community, but also just that global citizen mindset. All the money goes to GSI, and so every year the guys set goals to raise more and more money. And so the first year we raised about $4,000, but it was incredible to see this year that from the event there was a little nearly $14,000 raised. And so we created a VP position for just all our philanthropic efforts because it is such a large-scale event. So we have Greek Week and Homecoming here, and it's almost to the caliber or that level of how big of a deal it is on campus. And so something our alumni board really helped with was a scholarship for our VP of philanthropy. It's a priority that that person is going to GSI because they're the ones informing the entire chapter of the community about our philanthropy and where all the money is going to.
And lastly, for operations, we're going to look at elections. So we actually had our elections last night. You can see the new guys getting installed in the bottom right. But what the process looks like is we typically have a date set far in advance so everybody's informed on when elections will be. We run from November to November. But we also have a sign-up sheet and application process. And so the application sheet is pretty small, but it just gives an idea to the current executive board of guys who might be interested and why they're interested. And then the actual night of elections, we have the outgoing president give their State of the Union. It's kind of just a recap of everything that they've been through and learned through serving the chapter in that role. It's a really cool opportunity for that person and all the individuals in the chapter to hear. Like I said, we have an officer installment ceremony. So each officer who is potentially running for a position will give a speech, and these speeches are timed, and then we have discussion based on those following parliamentary procedure. We also have formal attire for these. It helps set the mood and make sure people are professional and serious. And then we use a polling process, like a polling app, to actually get votes and to make sure that the right candidate is selected. Okay, and then we have actually a pretty good system set for accountability, and this follows IHQ's policies, and so I'm assuming a lot of you guys do this as well, but we have a judicial board set up and ran by the Vice President of Membership Education, and his judicial board is comprised of members from all pledge classes, whether it's a freshman to a senior. So that's really nice. It's a diverse way to keep guys accountable. We host membership reviews, put people on social probation and academic probation if they're not meeting the standards set by the fraternity.
And so now we'll get into leadership development, and I'll start off by talking about just the IHQ programming that we utilize. And so I'm sure you're all aware of the excellent programs that our headquarters staff run, but we really make sure we get a key person going to the Emerging Leaders Conference, someone we think is going to be an up-and-coming key player for the chapter. And then for President's Academy, making it a priority, we always have the president go there. And then it's awesome that headquarters gives you those 2 spots for RLA or Leadership Institute. But since we have such a large chapter, we want to make sure we're well represented, and then also just have a ton of guys taking in the information. So typically we can have with our budget 8 to 10 guys going, and we make sure those exec board leaders are being well educated and then reporting back to the chapter everything that's done there. And so we understand there's different sized chapters, but I think it's awesome to have some sort of percentage, so you can bring that back to your chapter and make sure it's being executed there. Along with that, we really prioritize the prospective officers, so those future leaders. We just had elections last night, so this last week or last 2 weeks, it was a priority for us to meet with all those officers. I had one-on-one meetings with them. They talked about their ideas, what they were running for. They talked over their speech, and so it's a really great way for us to set them up for success and help them hit the ground running if they're elected with that position.
Something else that we do over here at Kansas State is we have retreats that we implement in the fall and spring. These retreats have been amplified the past 5 years because we've seen the benefits of them. We have them in the beginning of the January term, the January semester, as well as the fall semester. And what happens is the executive board moves into Manhattan, moves back into the house about a good week before the rest of the membership. So they're not distracted by classes, they're not distracted with hanging out with anybody else, and they're just focused on this retreat, which is typically held away from the house. We've done it in the Union, we've rented different facilities, we've done the local library, and essentially what it is it's a whole afternoon, typically anywhere between 4 to 6.5 hours, where it consists of team building, which is facilitated by the advisors, leadership workshops, where things we've done is personality tests, dynamics, group dynamics, doing some self-reflection, some activities that these men might not typically have ever done before, especially if they're stepping into a role. There's a lot of goal setting, which is done as an exec team, as well as in their own individual positions, and they're really, because there's enough time allotted for this, they can get into the weeds about what they really want to do in their term. The president and the VP are the ones who facilitate the majority of the retreat with preparation done with the advisors beforehand. So we set up an agenda for the entire retreat, and we do our parts, but then really the president is able to set the tone for his team. At this retreat, we also do some hot topics, which are things that the president feels that he really wants the executive board to be on the same page on before the rest of the membership joins them. And there's some calendar planning which is done. So what happens is the VP of administration spends some of their holiday break as well as their summer break looking up dates, holidays, dates that we already know from the campus, from the community, from other groups on campus that he puts on the calendar, so that when those men get into the room for calendar planning, they're not planning an event when, oh, that's a home football game, or that there's something else that eventually is going to derail their plans. So that calendar is put into a Google Calendar that is eventually shared with the entire chapter. So essentially men are coming into their semester with already a calendar of what to expect roughly for the rest of for the rest of the 4 months. We feel that the retreats really give us advisors an idea on how we can better serve and support the men, because we're able to kind of sit back and assess the dynamics of this new team, as well as the team and how it changes from the spring to the fall. It's also just captive time where for an entire afternoon, these men are strictly focused on bonding with each other and really looking ahead at how to make their chapter successful.
And along with the calendar planning, the executive board is really proactive with CEP, so everyone knows what their CEP are under their position, and then they go through and set the dates. This is when we're going to accomplish this CEP. This is when we're going to accomplish that CEP, and it just makes it a lot easier as they're submitting throughout the semester instead of going to the end of the semester and figuring out, okay, what did we do, what counts for CEP.
Something in terms of, I know campus PR is something that we prioritize within the chapter. We encourage the members to be involved in other things on campus. We feel it helps them to make a more well-rounded individual, as well as it helps with recruiting later in terms of referrals potentially. The men are encouraged to be supportive of other groups' events. They're very proud of being a DU, but at the same time, it's acknowledged that we're going to be putting on events that we're going to be asking other groups for some support, so it's important that we're supporting them. In fact, what the chapter does on occasion is if a sorority or if another group on campus is holding an event and it includes a dinner, the chapter will actually not have dinner at the house, and we'll pay for the members to go and support that group. So it's the money is just kind of moved so that we're able to show that support. We also have sorority relations under here. Obviously, there's a lot that the men are prioritizing, and we're not saying they have to prioritize women, but at the same time, we feel that it's important that the guys are have good relationships with women because sororities are very active. They're the ones who attend events. They're the ones who a lot of times are referring guys. And also, it's just a great quality to have in these young men to be able to interact with those of the opposite gender. And so it's something that they really try to do.
And so now we'll get into the facility. We understand that everyone has kind of a different setup, but there are some key things with our facility that makes the chapter run successfully. And so on our campus, it's very typical for new members to live in their first year. So all new men live in, and it's also typical within our facility to have the freshmen and sophomores, especially juniors, and then the executive board be living in the house. There's 81 members that live in, and then we're at about 110 or to 115 members every year. And we have a great roommate dynamic. The recruitment chairs are very strategic with who they pair new members with older guys, and so they want to make sure they're supported as soon as they move in. And then when they get their pledge dad or big brother, that's who they'll live with that next year. And so the house is a great place just to live life on life with the guys. It's a source of brotherhood, studying, eating, sleeping. There's just so much going on at the house all the time. The guys do plan brotherhood events, but really any time of the week you're going to catch guys doing something, and there will be something going on at the house. The house manager has been key this year. We do have our renovations, and so he works closely with the alumni board and the rest of the house to make sure everything's kept in good condition. And then we do have a great meal plan by a local restaurant with chefs, and do have a kitchen manager that helps with all that. So full stomachs and good food definitely correlates to satisfied members. But one thing we want to point out is that we do not have a live-in house mother. And so Kat is sometimes referred to as a house mom, but she does not live in. And so that'll kind of transition us into the different kinds of support there is. So I think we have somewhat of a unique advisory board And so we have the typical system where each VP has an alum or an advisor that's there to support them. But there's really 3 key players, which is me as the leadership advisor, Kat as the general advisor, and then Joe Knopp, who's alumni advisor. And so we're really in the weeds of everything. We're usually at the house 2 to 3 times every week and just constantly in contact with the officers. But what my role looks like is I'm at every single exec board meeting. I'm committed to being at every chapter meeting, and I give a report. If there's something special going on, I really hit on that. Sometimes I help with programming. I go to every special meeting or event, so membership reviews or the events that they host. I'm usually there. And then I've also made it a priority since becoming an advisor to have one-on-one meetings with every single new member. So I'm just getting to know them personally, but also making sure they have a smooth transition in the house. They understand my role, they understand expectations, and feel supported in any way possible. And so there are some things that like we really don't have a hand on. So like the guys got recruitment, they're making those decisions. They're leading the new member meetings. They're the ones that take care of the themes for social events. They run the social media accounts. They're the ones that take care of the chapter listserv and everything like that. The day-to-day operations. But the things we really do get more involved in are officer elections, making sure those are successful. We're getting the right leaders, helping with transitions and the development of the officers, really making sure programming is on point. And then when disciplinary or behavioral issues come up, we're a part of those conversations. But we're very events heavy, and so Kat and I are definitely in contact with officers, just making sure everything's in line from the centerpiece that's on the table to the program to anything you can think of. We're having those conversations and making sure everything's running smoothly.
In terms of communication with the chapter, Russell and I, and it's been kind of a thought that we really want to work through the officers, and so it's important to us that the chapter leaders are empowered, and so letting any reprimands or any handling of chapter issues happen at the hands of the leaders. We do obviously, praise in public and praise in private, but we allow the leaders to be able to gain those skills and to hold their peers accountable and to run their chapter. We communicate with chapter members, obviously, but we don't ever make a decision or take an action with a member without involvement of relevant officers, and of course the president. The president is aware of absolutely every priority or action that Russell and I have. As you can tell by the fact that you've heard NACE's voice a lot, the empowerment and confidence in the chapter members is really important to us, and we feel that advisors are really only as successful and strong as the undergraduates that we serve, and so really having them have a buy-in, but be the strongest voice and the strongest advocates for themselves, we feel is important.
We're very fortunate to have a engaged and very involved alumni board. So I think what really makes our alumni board stick out is their consistency. So they're meeting twice a semester, and then also in contact with me or the president weekly or every other week, depending on what's going on. But like Nate said, they help with new member orientation, and then they've been very key with facility operations, so with the renovations, and then house bills and housing contracts. That is really key for us to have them a part of all of that. As far as communication goes, we've really streamlined everything. So we do have chapter president Frank York, who is incredible and has been leading the board for years now, but really being in communication with Kat and I and Josh, and then from there getting the message across to the chapter. So having those clear bounds of communication, and it's really awesome during those meetings during the semester. We update them on everything each officer is doing. So the men almost treat it like it's a performance review and they're talking to their boss. So some of these guys are getting compensated for their position. So it's important that the alumni board hears that they're doing well, hearing about their goals, hearing what they're achieving. And so those meetings are just a great time for everyone. But I just want to point out much of the success is from the direct and indirect support that we have from our alumni board and our advisory board.
So next we're going to look at overcoming some obstacles, and we're going to first look at it at the collegiate level. So this is Nate again, by the way, and something that I think that was a problem, at least during my term, was not having a credible executive board. So what that means was some of the policies that we have in place locally and internationally weren't being followed to the T by some of the executive board members, which makes it hard to implement any lasting change if you can't even follow some rules of the house. And so I had to have some hard conversations with executive board members about what the priorities were and how they were going to lead moving forward. And if they weren't going to do that, then we were going to have to find a replacement for their position. Luckily, we didn't have to move forward with that, but having those hard conversations is definitely necessary. Kind of goes on to the next thing with accountability. So all members need to be held accountable for their actions, and whether you're a young leader or one of the older guys in the house, like you need to hold people accountable. And doing that can be a little bit hard when the guys you're leading are your friends, but understanding the separation between friendship and leadership is really important in that regard. And then lastly, membership not understanding the holistic view. What that means is maybe they don't understand what the alumni board is asking of us or what K-State IFC is asking of us. And so really being that liaison between all those parties that you have to communicate to, but also being a voice for the undergraduate chapter that you're representing, because ultimately those guys are the experiences you're affecting. And so you need to be representative of them, but be realistic in that representation.
So moving into some of the obstacles that some advisors may face, honestly, the men here at K-State, they're not perfect. Russell and I, we're not perfect. We're not perfect advisors by any means, and I'm sure you all face some obstacles in your roles, and so I'm going to touch on some of the common ones. First off, being local. It's difficult sometimes if you can't always be at the house or you're not always with the chaptermen and there's an inability to have a strong presence. As Russell touched on a little bit, I don't live in the house. I actually haven't lived in the same city, much less the same state as this chapter since 2013. I make visits, and I'm obviously in Manhattan now for the elections because I wanted to physically be here to support the men. But luckily in 2018, there are so many avenues to be connected. And so through texting, through FaceTime, through phone calls, through emails, obviously through these visits, and just constant communication, not only with the Collegians, but with fellow advisors. I think that's extremely important just to have a good grasp on and knowledge of things. So if you're not able to physically be, because of your family schedule or your work schedule, or you just live somewhere else, you're not able to be at the house, you are still very able to be engaged and involved and knowledgeable. It just might take a little bit more effort. Something else that chapters could face is stagnancy. You could be with your chapter and they've reached their goals, right? Or they won a certain award and they're excited, and so let's just not do anything to hurt that, and let's go ahead and just keep doing what we're doing. A lot of officers potentially get there, and by the time you realize that they've been stagnant, it's the end of their term. So a good pulse on that for us is if officers don't have reports at meetings, or if we're not seeing details in the minutes about what they're working on. And so that's directly working with the chapter president on having them pulse check with that member, to see if they're okay, if something's going on as to why they're not being as invested in their role as maybe they were before, but also to let them know that there's some accountability and that being in a role is a privilege to serve the chapter. And so the chapter president does a really good job always of checking on their leadership, on their brothers that are leaders. Something else is a derailment of officer focus. What I mean by that is there are so many things going on in these men's lives. There are so many distractions. A lot of times there's events, or there's a crisis, or there's an issue that is kind of demanding the attention and is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room, in the exec board meetings. And so it's kind of been our hope and our focus to, no matter what's going on, or if there's a big philanthropy event coming up, or if there's a membership review of somebody, or if there's an issue with the house, that not everybody on the executive team is in the weeds about that, and that really the chapter president and the most relevant officer is really working on that. But honestly, the chapter must go on, the show must go on, and we try not to derail focus too much, so that the other officers can still be productive while there's something large happening in other areas. And the last one, I think, that we can all kind of attest to is a buy-in of DU as well as chapter goals. Obviously, DU has some strong goals and some strong standards for our members, and the chapter sets their own goals. And so just having a buy-in is always a large challenge when working with any group. As you've heard from Nate, we really start from the beginning with the new members. That first week, when given that code of conduct, they have a great understanding of what is expected of them. And little by little, we build that up throughout their new member program. We also, as advisors, try to find members, even if it's just one or two, who can really advocate for the goals and who are respected by the rest of the chapter, so that they can be the mouthpiece for the productivity you want to achieve. And ideally, you get those men as leaders, and they're the ones leading your house, and eventually they will duplicate themselves. Lastly, we advise just being patient, because a lot of times it takes 2 years to form a tradition. It takes 4 years to change a culture. And so a lot of what we've talked about in this webinar and this afternoon has been over the course of the past 6 years. And really over the past 4 years have we really stepped up to be extremely intentional about all of the things that we're discussing with you today. In terms of maintaining excellence, obviously the recruitment is most important. Who you have in the chapter, and which men are sitting around those tables and making those decisions are the most important thing. So continuously prioritizing that within your group. Transitions is something that we really take pride in. We have a transition workshop, which is essentially like very similar to a retreat, but it is led by the incoming and outgoing president. They plan with the advisors before, and what that workshop is it's all of the outgoing officers and the incoming officers. It's done shortly after elections, definitely before Thanksgiving break and before they all leave for the holidays, and where they review job descriptions, best practices, expectations, and they go over resources, so that the men, before they leave for a month, they feel prepared for the next semester, even just a little bit, and that handoff is taken very seriously. As well as maintaining excellence, we have chapter bylaws, which are updated every other year. It just helps with consistency, as well as relevance. The men review it to make sure that they follow the IHQ policies, but also that it matches practice. And then we have, what we do is we have a versatility of support. What we mean by that is, as advisors, we can't just have a cookie cutter way of approaching things. We can't do the same things with every executive team. And so we really like to game plan together and have recognition that every team needs something different. And so us being able to be versatile and focus on what the men really need, because shame on us as advisors if we aren't thinking of new ideas, new solutions, and adjusting to our leadership just the same way that we ask our collegiate men to do.
Yeah, so this is Josh. I came in about 10 minutes ago, so I kind of missed most of it. But just going off the maintaining excellence and kind of like the mindset you want to have the focus we had this past year was kind of to improve each position, no matter how small or how big, because once you kind of find what works for your chapter and what works for each position and you start having success with that, it's hard to make improvements. So you want your executive board members to be able to come up with ideas to still improve their positions. And then obviously we have been recognized for various awards and stuff like that, but that's not really what you want to prioritize. As long as you prioritize academics and involvement in the community and involvement on campus, that stuff is just going to follow. So, and then another thing that we also like to take pride in is kind of our brotherhood within K-State DU, and I think it's really unique for us, and it's something we take pride in. You don't really have a separation between pledge classes that you might see at other fraternities, and I think that's a big thing in running the chapter efficiently. So.
And then lastly, for maintaining excellence, it comes down to prioritizing things, but also tackling things one thing at a time. So like Kat said earlier, you need to be patient with the men on things that aren't the non-negotiables or the things that are detrimental to the chapter. So taking baby steps, recognizing that it takes time to either build conducive practices or eradicate hindering ones, just setting realistic goals for each member in the house, not going in saying you must change this, but how can we just change a few things and get it closer to really the ideal situation we're looking for. And so to end our presentation, we want to go into just our overall philosophies. So I'm going to start with mine. And I think the first would be that the little things matter. The little things are what make up the big things. And so what's really incredible is that our executive board spends, the hour to hour and a half every Sunday night just talking through what the next week's going to look like. And so it's incredible for like move out or a certain event that there are so many details that go into it to make sure that it's executed the proper way. And I think something that's been important for me is showing the men the way, but then letting them run with it. So giving them my ideas, just talking through everything. But at the end of the day, it's them doing the work. I'm not going to micromanage them. It's up to them if they want to take it or do anything with it. And then I kind of said this already, but change starts with buy-in. So there was rarely ever a time in the last 2 years where it was like, J-Rob, like, you must do this, or this has to be done. It was like, what do you think? What do you think would be best in this situation? Give me my input, but again, when the guys were bought in, that's when I saw change starting to happen, not when I said, you have to do this. And then lastly, I think going back to the basics. So everything we do as an organization should go back to our 4 founding principles. And so that's a question I constantly bring up with the men. Does it tie back to our 4 founding principles? And if we can say yes to that question, then we're definitely headed in the right direction. And if we can't say yes to that, then maybe that's something we shouldn't prioritize or something we shouldn't really be doing anymore.
Okay, and just from like the undergraduate perspective, some of the philosophies that we've kind of like developed over the time of our leadership, and luckily we have great advisors, but advisors really need to be understanding of what the undergraduate chapter wants and needs. They need to obviously give some insight into if these ideas or requests are reasonable, but if they are, like really provide that support to the undergraduate chapter and the leadership. And so that kind of goes into both the first 2 points, and I'll hand it over to J-Rob.
Yeah, so focusing on your membership, that can be either within DU or within your college campus. So obviously the membership education program is great as a new member, but once you get past that, it's kind of the vice president of membership education to bring in speakers and develop the guys in various areas. And then also you should always encourage your members to get involved on campus to self-develop themselves, whether it's an honor society or maybe a business fraternity or an ambassador. If you develop your members like that, you're going to see success inside your fraternity. you're going to get the fraternity's name out in the community, and there's really only positives that can come from that. So.
In terms of some of my philosophies and how I view the role as an advisor, we discuss this at the chapter quite often. I believe that a chapter success is dependent on who they let in, who they let stay, and who they let lead. And if they focus on those three things, then everything else will kind of take care of itself. Consistency is key. Having advisors and having alumni and having support and advocates for the men that have been there for a couple terms, who have been there for some time, helps the men have stability in their ever-changing lives as fraternity college men. I also have care about who members are, then what they can do for the chapter. Honestly, the goals of these guys are my goals. So I truly feel that advisors, that their role is to ensure that we're supporting their goals, whether that be personally, academically, professionally, and then in DU. We have to care about who these guys are, about their personal lives, without being too intrusive, obviously, but how they are doing in school, how their relationship is going with their girlfriend or their partner, how their family is doing, what is heavy on their heart and mind. Because the effort of investing in these concepts of their lives, it must coexist with also checking in on them in their DU roles and asking them to do things for the fraternity. And the last thing I have is don't fix something if it's not broken, obviously, but we can always remember that absolutely everything can and should be shined up. And so even if it's just a little bit, there's always that opportunity for improvement. So with that, we appreciate you listening to the ins and outs of the Kansas State chapter. We want to make sure that we tackle any specific questions that you all have. If there's anything that we discussed that you'd like us to go more in detail about, anything you need us to paint a better picture for you, then we will. Or just any other topic or question that you feel would help you in your role or the chaptermen that you're leading, then we would love to hear from you or read them here. So we'll take some time.
See if you can pull down the bottom part. Right there. Oh, no. Go down a little bit more. Yeah. See if any of it. Sorry guys, we're trying to get it blown up so we can see your questions.
Oh, there you go.
All right, we're just opening up some of these contents. Let's see. Thank you for the engagement, everybody.
Can we get a copy of packet of new members presentation?
So it looks like the first question so far was, can we get a copy of the packet for new members and parents? I think, yeah, definitely. Definitely we'll have to adapt it a little bit to your chapter, but like we'll send you over what we have, and feel free to adapt that and housing contract, everything. So.
Mm-hmm. And our last slide has our contact information, so you can definitely email us for anything, and we'd love to give you that file or continue the conversation.
So yeah, presentation of men learning what women want, etc., does not include gay men. Yes, that is true. I think, yeah, Kat's gonna talk on that a little bit.
That's a great point. We have actually been in discussions about including a man on the panel, and obviously all of the discussions are open given the diffusion of liberal culture and the openness that we have as a fraternity. So we're in discussions of amplifying that program. It's been a tradition for a while, but there does need to be some improvements in there to make it open, and we're in conversations about that. Thank you for that comment. The presentation will be shared after the call. It will be sent in a link with all the other advisor webinars since this is being recorded.
The next question is, Rush at Oregon State starts third week of school, not before. Thoughts? So I guess Jeff, if you want to respond to with another question, saying if it's formal or informal, and maybe we can give you some more thoughts on that. Really quick, guys, we're going to unmute all of you in case, and hopefully this works. Sometimes this can be a little noisy, but we'll give it a shot, and then you can ask any questions for us.
Can they hear each other?
I think so.
Like they need to, well, everyone else, they should be able to. Hey, Jeff, can you hear us? We should have you unmuted right now. If you're still there.
Nope. Oh, wait, I see what I wanted for my birthday. Yeah, but I don't remember now. No, I don't remember, and I always forget. I'm like, I don't care, whatever.
Go to contact information.
Okay.
If anybody has any other questions they'd like to type, the microphone is getting pretty noisy as expected.
So to wrap things up, we just want to give you our contact information. Again, feel free to reach out with any questions you have, or if there's something that stuck out to you, like the new member presentation or something else we've implemented. We'd love to send you documents or just give you as much information as we can. But those are all our emails, and you're free to reach out to each of us.
And if you have any suggestions or ideas for us, we'd love to hear them as well, and we can go back and forth with brainstorming. But we want to just first of all thank International Delta Upsilon, thank you headquarters for allowing us this opportunity to speak about this chapter. And we hope you all have found this helpful, and we're at least able to pull a few examples that can be beneficial, or at least tweaked for you and your chapter. Obviously, thank you for serving your collegiate chapters. We know that it can be challenging, but that it is so rewarding. And we wish you all the satisfaction of seeing the chapters that you're working with to achieve and maintain success in the future. We really do wish you continued success, and may your chapters thrive.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.